Hi, I'm Signal Managing Editor Perry Smith, and on behalf of the Signal and publisher Richard Budman, I'd like to welcome you to our 25th Congressional District Candidate Debate. I'd like to first thank the candidates for participating. And during the process of organizing this get-together, the candidates agreed to the following format. I, as moderator, will give the prompt on a topic. The candidate who goes first will then have 1 minute to discuss the topic, and then the other candidate will have 1 minute to respond. The candidate who originally answered will then have 30 seconds to rebuttal, and then so will the second candidate. If the original candidate refuses the rebuttal opportunity, we'll move on to the next topic. We'll then reverse the order for the next topic. Should one of the candidates exceed their allotted time, they will hear a following alert, and we ask that they move on. So let's begin with an opening statement. Both candidates will have a 1 minute opening statement. We flip the coin. Katie Hill, you're going first.
Right. Well, first of all, I want to thank you so much for this opportunity. It's also great to be back here on the College of the Canyons campus. I have spent a lot of time here over the years as a student and getting my master's at the University Center. This is an opportunity for us here in the 25th District and in Santa Clarita to change politics as usual. For too long, we've had representatives in Washington who have been accountable to big corporations and special interests and partisan politics and have failed to put the needs and concerns of all of us at the forefront. So instead of common sense solutions, we've seen political rhetoric, we've seen people say one thing and then do another, and we've seen now decades of the same problems over and over and over again without real solutions. So it's time for all of that to change. We have a chance here in this district to cast a vote that will be more important than any vote we've ever cast here. So I look forward to this debate, and I look forward to the opportunity to serve this district. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Katie. Steve Knight, you have 1 minute.
And I want to thank the Signal for putting on this forum. I want to thank Ms. Hill for coming to the forum. You know, it's interesting. We're talking about resistance and results here, I think. I think that you've got a candidate that wants resistance, and you've got a candidate that's got results. In my first 9 months in Congress, we did the #1 priority in this valley, and everyone talked about it. It was CMEX. In 9 months, we turned around the contracts 180 degrees. They cannot mine. CMEX cannot mine. In my next session in Congress, we did a bill making sure that there wouldn't be any mining in that area in the future. That is a result. We looked at CDBG funds. CDBG funds were down. We put $100 million into CDBG funds so that cities just like Santa Clarita can use that type of money for senior centers and other types of issues. And just recently, we got a $47 million grant, or actually payment, for the choke point on the I-5 freeway. These are real results for Santa Clarita. Thank you.
Thank you for your opening statements. And that transitions us to our first topic. Again, all throughout the topic, the first candidate who responds will have the option of leading the conversation. Then the second candidate will have 1 minute. We'll go back for 30 seconds, and so on. And Katie, again with the coin flip, we went to you first. What is your number one priority if elected?
Yeah, so there are countless priorities that we have to address, and I don't want to put any of those as secondary necessarily. But I think the underlying issue that we face in terms of addressing any of those other issues is our accountability in government. And part of that means really restoring faith of people in our politics, in our government, and in our institutions. So one of the first things I want to address is campaign finance reform. I want to address voting rights, and I want to address the corruption that we're seeing in Washington. And part of that is all part of a package that we're going to be introducing to the floor right away with Democratic leadership. And I believe that that'll lay the groundwork for us to show that we are committed as a party and as individuals with this new change to ensuring that voters have a voice and that we are going to be working for them and not the political powers that be as usual.
Steve, you have a 1 minute response.
Well, again, we are the local congressmen, so we worked right here with the district. We work with the issues of the district. We don't go to Washington, D.C. to find an issue so that we can work on some big Washington, D.C. issue. We actually talk to the city council and the members of the community to fix something here. Now, for the last 24 years, CMEX has been the #1 issue. Absolutely. Anyone in Santa Clarita would say that. The choke point at the I-5 as it cuts off to the 14 have been a huge issue. So these are accomplishments. But when you go to Congress and you're sitting on committees, you better have a plan of what you're going to do. I said on armed services. The reason I said on armed services is so we can get more training, more pilot time, more sailing time, more ground pounding time. That is what I've worked on. That'll be what I continue to work on. Small business and science, I work with small businesses to see how they can achieve their goals and continue to create opportunities.
Katie, you have an option for a 30-second rebuttal.
Yeah, just a couple of things. First of all, I've been a resident of Santa Clarita for most of my life, and Congressman Knight keeps saying that CMEX is the #1 issue, and I hate to say it, but that's not the case for most people I know. And I think that CMEX is an important issue, of course, but it's something that I hadn't even heard of until relatively recently, and it's certainly something that my parents, my friends, my family hadn't heard of. And as for the I-5 expansion, I find it ironic that we're talking about a $47 million grant when Congressman Knight openly supports the repeal of the gas tax that provides the main source of funding for that project.
Steve, would you like to respond to that for 30 seconds?
Very interesting, too, that we have 70,000 people that commute from the Antelope Valley into the LA Basin every day. We have tens of thousands that commute from Santa Clarita and another tens of thousands that commute from Simi Valley. And to say that Prop 6, the repeal of this gas tax, is not an important thing, I think that that's really degrading these people. We can fund this at the state level. We've gone from $99 billion when I was there 4 years ago to $142 billion, not $1 into roads.
Okay, again, now for the next prompt, Steve, you're going to go first. Stance on Social Security.
My stance on Social Security has been very firm. I've gotten an award each of my 2 sessions in Congress for being a defender of Social Security. Now, these ads that are going out is one item of a huge answer. When I tell the huge answer to all of the seniors that I go out and talk to, they nod their head and say, boy, I wish we would have heard that. Well, that's politics. Politics are, when you're trying to unseat somebody, you take a small part of an answer, you pull it out, and you throw it out to a whole bunch of people hoping to scare them. The people in this district know I've been a defender of Social Security from the very, very beginning. I think that Social Security should be strong for this generation as for my generation, which is the next, and continuum. But also remember, it's been around for more than 70 years. And we do have to work to make sure that Social Security will continue.
Katie?
Yeah, so I'm endorsed by every major organization that supports Social Security and Medicare that has made it a priority to protect our seniors. I think that the words of the congressman speak for themselves in terms of saying that Social Security is a bad idea. And I recognize that things are taken out of context. Certainly, some of the words that I've said have been taken out of context during the course of this campaign. But fundamentally, we're talking about the Republican Party that has made it perfectly clear that they want to gut Social Security and Medicare in order to pay for the tax cuts for the wealthiest people in our country. That is the inevitable result of the tax plan that has been passed, the tax plan 2.0 that we are seeing the attempts to pass, and which Congressman Knight has supported wholeheartedly. So we have to protect Social Security. It's a huge priority for me. It's something that I've seen the direct results of even Social Security not being enough to provide for the cost of living for seniors in this community, and I will be a consistent and straightforward advocate for.
So here's the difference. She's saying I will be. I'm saying I have been. There is consistency with what I've done from the state legislature to Congress as being a defender of Social Security. That is concrete. It is evidentiary out there that shows this. It's not a, boy, if you send me there, I'll do this. You're actually putting somebody there that has already done it. My evidence is concrete. Evidence over here is a wisp of hopefully she'll do it.
Yeah, so I would just counter that by saying that every major organization whose sole purpose is to defend Social Security has given Congressman Knight an F rating and has instead put their support behind me. So while I haven't been there, I certainly haven't received an F rating, and I look forward to fulfilling the promises that I've made on this campaign trail, and which not only am I behind, but the rest of my party is behind as well.
Okay, thank you. And we're going to go on to the next topic, education reform. Katie, we're going to go with you first.
Just education reform in general?
Yeah.
Sure. So
you have the topic. You
Sure.
can take the discussion where you need to go.
Sure. So first of all, the reason that people come to this community is for good schools. It's the reason that my family came to this community, and it's the reason that so many other people come here, is because they want to provide for the best possible education for their kids. The reality is that at the federal level, we have a absolute mandate to provide for the funding that makes sure that kids who are in every community, whether it's parts of this area or other, in the Antelope Valley, other regions, to have the same kinds of opportunities that I've been afforded and that other people here in this valley have been afforded. We have to fully fund special education. We have to fully fund Title I and Title II schools. And I believe that we deserve the opportunity to be creative in terms of the education that we're looking at, and that at the state level we need to be partnering with the federal government as well.
Steve, 1 minute from you, please.
So, very open-ended question here, but the fact of the matter is public education, the majority of that money comes from your state budget. When I was there, I voted to make sure that our schools were firm and we were getting good funding, because my children have actually gone to public education every year of their life. I sat on the PTA for 12 years. I know what public education is. It's not a platitude of just saying, boy, we got to put more money out there, we got to fully fund this. I actually worked with the teachers and actually worked on a PTA to find out what are the issues. And the issues here in Santa Clarita might be different than the issues in La Jolla or Palmdale or wherever you say. So we've got to allow that local control to happen. The local control funding mechanism that happened about 4 years ago was a step in the right direction. But a complete step would be allowing our local elected board members to actually have that authority to move forward with their schools and their priorities.
Katie, you have a 30-second response.
Yeah, I had the privilege of attending every single year of school in public schools as well. Highlands Elementary School here in Santa Clarita, Arroyo Seco Junior High, Saugus High School here at College of the Canyons, and then Cal State Northridge. So I too know the exact benefits of a public school system and where it has increased needs. So I think one thing that we actually have to really pay attention to is that there is a need for local control. But more importantly than anything else, we have to have commitments at the federal, state, and local government levels to fully provide for the resources that kids need to get the education they deserve.
Thank you. And did you have a...
Sure. Well, there's a big difference here. There's obviously a huge difference between us. One wants big government to come in and take care of schools. I've seen this. I've been a parent of 2 children. Yes, I went to public school too. When you're going to school, you're going to school to learn and get an education. But when your kids are going to school, you're looking at the totality of what's happening. And when you're on a PTA, you're looking at every little nook and cranny. And the local control is a very big part of this. Don't let big government come over and take care of our schools.
All right, thank you. Next topic, we're going to go to the debate about ICE. Steve, what are your thoughts on the subject? You have 1 minute.
Well, it's very clear. I was the Los Angeles police officer for 18 years. I believe fully in law enforcement. I also believe fully that our border is guarded by very brave men and women every day, and we've got to give them more support. I believe that our border security should be strengthened. That means that if there are places where you can actually walk over the border, which there are, then we should fix that. If we need more boots on the ground and we need more control there, then we should fix that. I believe in a total experience at the border of fixing what is not there and making sure that it is safe. Not just for the drugs that come over and the sex trafficking, but the possibility of a terrorist attack, of bringing something over our border and then detonating it right here in the United States. So I fully support ICE.
Katie, you have 1 minute.
Yeah, so the debate over ICE, I think, is the wrong debate, first of all. Second of all, I think that it's something that we should be talking about in reference to what is a comprehensive plan for immigration reform? What does that look like? I'm proud to be supported by not only Border Patrol agents, but also by immigration organizations, a number of them, because I believe strongly that most people can agree that there are common sense solutions to the issue of immigration. We can be compassionate. We can also have tough border control, making sure that dangerous people, sex traffickers, drug traffickers are stopped. And at the same time, we are allowing for people who want to come into this country, work here legally, and contribute to our society, have the opportunity to do so. I think that this is something that the vast majority of people in this community agree on, and we need politicians who are going to put the rhetoric aside and actually get to work on something that is beneficial for all of us.
Steve, you have the opportunity for 30 seconds.
Yeah, I love it when people put out comprehensive immigration reform. They absolutely know nothing about how things work in government. If you use that term, people shut down automatically. So I'm part of a bipartisan group that's Republicans and Democrats going in and looking at the items that we can actually do on immigration and the border. We work together very closely. These are not all Republicans, not all Democrats. We work on border security, we work on visas, we work on TPS, we work on DACA, and we're trying to get smaller bills that will actually pass the muster.
Katie, you have 30 seconds to respond.
Yeah, so the Republican Party has made it clear that they are not willing to get anything done on any kind of immigration policies. And well, no matter what Congressman Knight's personal views may be on immigration, there's only one vote that really matters on whether we're going to be able to do anything on immigration in the coming years, and that's the vote for Speaker, because Speaker is who determines whether that's coming to the floor or not. And we've seen over and over again that Congressman Knight is accountable to the Speaker that is currently there, to Donald Trump, and to what I would assume is Kevin McCarthy.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to the next topic. We touched on CEMEX, so I'm going to go, we'll circle back to that and take line item control for one budget item. You have 1 minute.
Is it mine?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Be a little bit more.
No, I apologize. Steve, you went last first time. It is Katie's turn to go.
Yeah, can you be a little more specific? What do you mean by that?
If you had control over one budget item, complete line item control, you could add to it, you could remove it, what would you do? And which item?
Sure.
And what would you do?
So one of the major items that I think we need to address is with respect to housing. And one of the issues that we hear about over and over again across this entire district is the lack of housing that people can afford. That goes from home ownership all the way through multifamily housing and rental units down into people experiencing homelessness, because it's an effect that ripples across our entire community. We need to have tax credits that are going to make it more possible for people to buy their first home. We need to ensure that we are protecting the mortgage interest rate deduction that makes it possible for people to afford mortgages in the long run. We need to actually develop rental units, because currently one of the reasons that our rents here rival those of New York City is because there's not enough of them. There are not enough multifamily rental units that are available to people who can't afford to buy a home right now. And high rents and low vacancy rates are exactly what lead to homelessness. So that's one of my issues that I have a great deal of expertise in, and that I look forward to bringing that experience to Washington.
Thank you. Steve, you have 1 minute to respond.
I think if I understand the question, these are big, expansive items, but the one that moves kind of quickly year after year is defense. Defense of the nation moves in different avenues as the year goes by. We don't know who is going to be our threat or who's going to be actually our friend or foe in certain times of the year. So I would say in defense, we need to be a little bit more open to that if you're talking about a line item veto on certain issues in defense. But remember, the National Defense Authorization Act is the only thing we've passed in Congress for 50 plus years that comes out of armed services. And once that is passed and into law like it is now, then certain things can happen from Department of Defense and issues like that. But remember, defense as a whole of this nation is something that moves as the threats appear.
Katie, you have 3 seconds to respond.
I don't think I need to respond.
Okay, then we'll move right to the next item. Legislation for the 3D printing of guns. Steve, you have 1 minute.
I've been very clear on the legislation of 3D printing guns. First, I am a gun owner. I wouldn't own a 3D printed gun. I just don't think that that's something that's safe on the very first part. And the second part, I don't know how we're going to track these guns at this level. A gun needs to have a serial number. A gun needs to have tracking. When I was a police officer, we had many guns that were on the street that were stolen from burglaries, and the gun had never been registered. So now we have to kind of track where this gun goes and all of that. 3D printing brings a whole new kind of issue of guns that could be very dangerous. And it's not a proven technology. It's not anything. It's just I think that the people that are going through this are trying to do something that is not there.
Okay. Katie, you have 1 minute to respond.
Sure. So what I didn't hear from Congressman Knight is an answer regarding legislation. And the first thing that we need to do is to pass legislation that does ensure that if 3D gun printing is happening, that we are saying, A, that it's illegal, B, that if there is any kind of exception for which it's legal, that there's proper monitoring and tracking. And I recognize that, of course, we're not going to be able to monitor that completely, but there are all kinds of illegal activities that we're not able to monitor completely. But the only way that you can start to do so is if we actually have a law in place. But one thing I did want to point out is just that, you know, recently we've heard from Congressman Knight that he is no longer taking NRA money. But I think the reason you might not have heard anything about legislation is because he still has an A+ rating from the NRA. The NRA opposes regulations on 3D printing of guns and on any kind of gun regulations. And that's something that is going to continue to be a problem.
Steve, you have 30 seconds.
Experience matters. It's already illegal. It's already a crime. So experience does matter. If you don't know these things, you can come into a debate and just say whatever the heck you want, and people will go, boy, that sounds right. But when somebody calls you on it and says it's already illegal, it's already in a federal code, then there's a problem there. The issue with guns is I'm a responsible gun owner. Katie has put all of her guns on a kitchen table in her house and gotten into a whole Facebook thread about the guns. That is absolutely nothing I would ever do. I'm a responsible gun owner. I lock up my guns, nobody can get to them, and I'm very safe when I use my guns.
Thank you, Katie.
I just think it's funny that we're talking about a Facebook picture of guns when we're talking about somebody who has the A+ rating from the NRA, but that's okay. So, you know, I know for a fact that there's not legislation that specifically calls out 3D printing of guns. So anyway, I think that we can argue about this all day long, but the fact is that we need people who are going to be accountable to people in this community and not to the gun lobby. It's that simple.
Okay, moving on to the next topic, fixing the VA. Katie, you're up first.
Sure. So as the executive director of PATH, one of the most significant things that we worked on was veterans experiencing homelessness. During my time there, we literally helped thousands of veterans move off the streets into permanent homes. We saw over and over again the failure on the part of the VA to adequately serve veterans who were traumatized in their experiences, whether that's through PTSD or ultimately some kind of mental health issues or substance abuse. And what we know now is that those services are being cut, and they're being quietly cut and undermined by attempts at privatization and by attempts to undermine the resources that are already in place. So the Sepulveda VA, which is the one that serves most veterans in this community, has completely ceased to provide mental health services. So people either have to go down to West LA or they need to they get telecare for mental health services, and that is one of the biggest crises facing our veterans. The other thing is housing. All of these are major issues, and it's something that we cannot ignore. We have to provide the resources, and we have to have someone who's committed to doing that.
Thank you, Katie. Steve?
Look, I don't think there's anybody in Congress that's worked more closely to the VA or with the VA than I have. My last week I was there before we came home to be in the district. I had 2 meetings with a deputy undersecretary and other folks in the VA about our program. Our program is to allow veterans to actually go into an urgent care clinic in the district, right here in Santa Clarita or Simi Valley or Palmdale, and get care instead of having to go to a CBOC or Sepulveda or West LA. The issue with psychiatric care and psychology care and clinicians down at Sepulveda, we are very aware of that. In fact, we brought this up to the undersecretary and said this is not acceptable. And when you go to West LA, now there are only 3 clinicians down there with 7,000 patients. So if a new patient goes in, they're looking at about a 4 to 6 month time period before they will get their appointment. So this is absolutely out of bounds for us. We work very closely with them to fix these problems, and we've been doing that for 3.5 years.
Thank you, Steve. Katie, you have 30 seconds.
Well, the reality that is the problem with why the VA is understaffed in terms of psychologists, psychiatrists, and healthcare providers across the board is because of pay and staffing shortages. So we've seen the federal government employees bear the brunt of budget cuts across the board, and that's something that the Republican Party and Donald Trump are willing to throw under the bus every single time. It's hard to work in public service. We all know that. And we have to have competitive pay and benefits to be for people to be willing to do so, and especially to recruit trained healthcare providers and mental health care providers.
Thank you, Katie. Steve, you have
I'm
to-
glad there's acknowledgement that it's hard to work in the public service sector. I did that for many, many years. The issue is not what's happening with pay and benefits with the clinicians. It's that the clinicians, there's not enough across the board. This is a problem with getting people into our medical schools like UC Riverside or wherever they want to go, getting them through the process and then getting them the training so that they can work with veterans. Just because you have that degree doesn't mean you get to work with veterans.
Okay, thank you for that. We'll go on to our next topic. Steve, you're up first. The topic is sanctuary cities.
When I was in the legislature, sanctuary cities started to become this issue across California, and we've seen the big cities from San Francisco to San Diego all become sanctuary cities, including Los Angeles. I think that when sanctuary cities tried to become a sanctuary state was a huge difference. Now, here in this district, we've had 2 cities that have opted out of SB 54 and said that we don't believe that we need to be a sanctuary city in a sanctuary state. About a year ago, Governor Brown came to a luncheon that I got to talk to him, and I said, please don't vote for the sanctuary state because it puts us at a disadvantage. The cities that want to do it are doing it, and if they do it, they're doing it on their own accord. Don't force it on other cities. He didn't believe that, and he voted for it.
Okay, you have a 1-minute response.
Yeah, the whole concept around sanctuary cities is a false narrative, and it comes down to what we're seeing at every single level, which is a failure around immigration policy. That is something that you can't say it should be localized because this is something that needs to be nationally consistent. It's also something that we have to really get a grip around how we can have smart immigration policy that is both tough and effective and compassionate. And there is no reason that we can't do all of those. This whole term around sanctuary cities is one that is thrown around. It's politicized. It's something that further divides our community. It's unnecessary, and it's something that I think we should be moving away from.
Thank you, Katie. Steve, would you like to rebut?
I'm good.
Okay, and we'll move on to the next topic. Katie, you're going first, and the topic is net neutrality.
Sure. So net neutrality is something that is so important for us to maintain our access to the internet, that everyone, at this point, we need to be looking at the internet as something like a public utility. And the regulations that we're putting in place should ensure that. And we've seen the influence of corporations and huge conglomerates like AT&T affect our politicians and affect the people who are supposed to be protecting consumers. We saw the impact of net neutrality, or the lack of net neutrality, impact firefighters who were trying to fight in California fires. It's something that I think we have to absolutely address. It's affecting the entertainment industry. IATSE and the Writers Guild of America are some of the organizations and unions that support me. And it's reducing jobs. This major content is created by Netflix and by Hulu. And now if we don't have net neutrality, then that is going to cut jobs in our community right here in the entertainment industry.
Thank you, Katie. Steve, you have 1 minute to respond.
We've been very vocal about this. We've been very supportive of net neutrality. We think that the speed throttling and everything that could happen because of this is something that could hurt the content of getting that speed to users. We've been very clear on this. I am a huge supporter of net neutrality, and I think that when we see this in the 116th Congress, this is going to blow up, and there is going to be a lot of friction between the two, whether Democrats are on one side or Republicans, or if you get some crossover. But I actually think this is something that's going to be worked out with Democrats and Republicans to make sure that when people go onto the internet, there is no throttling, they're getting their content, it's coming to them at the speeds that their neighbor is getting it at, and contracts can be worked out instead of using those as a hostage. So I've been very clear on net neutrality.
Katie, you have 30 seconds to respond.
Yeah, I think, again, this is something that with whatever Congressman Knight's personal views are on this, if we don't have a majority that is going to put people before corporations, then we're not going to see any movement on this issue. The Republican Party as a whole and President Trump have made it clear that they do not care about net neutrality. They do not care about consumers. They care about profits, and profits for the corporations that their shareholders are donating to their campaigns. So we need to make sure that we have people who are not accountable to those entities.
Thank you, Katie. And
So again, I've been very clear. I've written articles, put things out about net neutrality, and by her definition, she doesn't want an independent thinker in Congress, because she is saying that the Republicans want to do this, and yet Knight won't do that, what they're saying they want to do. So that would be an independent thinker. That would be somebody who goes up and looks at the issue and actually makes a decision with their own brain. So I've been clear on net neutrality. I've been clear that I'm very supportive.
all right. Thank you. We'll go on to our next topic, which is our biggest national security threat. Steve Knight.
So our biggest national security threat is about fivefold. But if you look at our near adversaries, you're looking at Russia and China. You look at China because just the sheer impact of their economy and the amount of money that they can put into new technologies and their buildup of their defense over the last 5 years. Russia, after it was broken up and became Russia, has gone through a very deep lull, and now they are building back out of it. So we're seeing Russia as a very, very difficult near adversary. But then you look at all of the other rogue nations, and I put Iran at the very top of these types of nations that can get some sort of a new product, new kind of technology, and then use it here in the United States or against one of our allies. So it is a big, big picture that you must watch every day.
Katie, you have 1 minute.
Yeah, I would say that our biggest threat to national security right now is the completely erratic foreign policy that has been happening under this administration. We have seen historic lack of investment into our State Department in terms of diplomacy. There are countless unfilled jobs, and we have leaders or non-leaders who are making it clear that they don't have any kind of consistency in terms of foreign policy. And we don't know if we're friends with North Korea or with Russia one day or enemies the next. Same with China. We're starting conflicts when we have no plan on how we're going to be addressing those. And so what we need are people who are going to stand up to this administration to say that this is an unacceptable way for us to operate as a country. We have the most powerful defense in place, and now we need to have the foreign policy and the diplomacy that matches that.
Steve, you have a 30-second
So
rebuttal.
sitting on armed services, the biggest responsibility I have is to decide if we're going to send young men and women into harm's way. If we would have had this debate a year ago, the very first question would come out of your mouth was, how do we deal with North Korea? Today, we're not talking about North Korea as we would have a year ago, because diplomacy and policy changes are working. Some of them are very tough, but they are working. So again, armed services and defense of this nation moves, and we've always got to be prepared.
Katie, you have a 30-second response.
Yeah, I think I would just reiterate that we're not talking about North Korea right now, but the threat has not changed. We have not seen denuclearization. We have seen consistently that this is something that could come up at a moment's notice because of the erratic behavior of this administration. And it's something that Congressman Knight has refused to stand up to. So I think that what we need to see are people who are, you mentioned that we need independent thinkers. And while net neutrality is one example, the examples are over and over again that your voting record shows that you're with Trump 99% of the time. And that's different than the words that you're speaking.
And that is the end of the 30-second response. We're going to go to the next topic. Katie, you're going to go first, and the topic is trade policy reform.
So right now we're seeing trade policy that is negatively affecting Americans across the country. The whole concept of tariffs that we're seeing from the Trump administration is hurting farmers. It's affecting prices for consumers. We're not seeing necessarily dramatic price increases right at this very moment, but we're going to. And I think it's clear that there's a misunderstanding in this administration about what tariffs even are. So what we need is a Congress that is going to influence trade policy is going to make sure that we're making smart decisions around how are we going to best benefit this country in terms of our farmers, in terms of our workers, in terms of our consumers. And right now there is no consistent thought process around it, and there are no checks and balances to make sure that we're not harming our own citizens.
Steve, you have 1 minute.
I think what you're going to see is you're going to see an independent thinker that actually gets things done. Here's another example. When these trade tariff policies came out, we were very clear on many of them across the board that we needed to stand up, meaning me, and say this isn't right. We did that with the solar industry. We wrote the very first letter with me and Jimmy Panetta, who's a congressman here in California, about the newspaper tariffs. We got that reversed. So I think that the administration is being very aggressive, and I like that because you do need to be aggressive to get some things done. And a perfect example of that is how quickly the EU came to the table after these tariffs had kind of moved forward, and the EU quickly came to the table and said, we've got to have an agreement on this. So whether I agree with the policies moving forward every time or not, I like aggressiveness to get something done for Americans, but when it's not going in the way that we think, then I will absolutely put something out against it.
Thank you. Katie, you have 30 seconds.
Yeah, I would just go again to the actions speak louder than words. And Congressman Knight is with Donald Trump 99% of the time. And I don't agree with anyone 99% of the time, let alone a president and a party that I am saying I'm an independent thinker around. So I think that that's something that we simply have to take into consideration when we're talking about whether we can count on Congressman Knight as a true independent thinker.
Congressman Knight?
So what she's saying is it's 99% of the time because an ultra-liberal group put out a issue and she ran with it. Because this ultra-liberal group said that this is what's happening, so let's run with that. Let's actually look at something that is bipartisan, that is Republican and Democrat. Look at the Lugar Institute. The Lugar Institute put me as the number 63 most bipartisan member of the House of Representatives. So that's not saying that I'm with the Republicans all the time, but it is saying I'm an independent thinker and we get things done bipartisan.
Okay, thank you. And moving on to the next topic. Again, this is a broad prompt, and you guys can lead the discussion where you'd like on defense spending and the military's budget. Steve?
So defense spending, we've seen over the last year and a half that we got a 2-year budget. We went into this saying that we need a 2-year budget on defense because we've been in combat for 17 years. In 17 years, we have many rotations. I've talked to several members of the military that have had 6 rotations or more in the last 17 years, and that just wears them down. We also break things because we're using them so much. So we needed a rebuild of the military. That's how we got this 2-year budget on the military. That's how we got this appropriation for the military of last year and this year. It has increased. It's gotten us more cockpit time. It's gotten us more sailing time, more ground pounding time. It's made sure that our people know that if we send you in harm's way, you're going to be prepared. We also put a huge amount of money into new services for family members, more adequate housing on bases, and more counseling for people that might be in MST or PTSD.
Katie, you have 1 minute to respond.
Sure. As far as military spending goes, it's something that has to be a huge priority for us in terms of deterrence of threats, in terms of the safety of our troops, whether that is, in terms of foreign engagements, but also in terms of our equipment. And it's also something that is really important in terms of the jobs that are here in this community, something that I would be an advocate for. I also think we actually need to consider that it is through armed services and through defense spending that we are actually providing a great deal of social services. And I think that that has been one of the only avenues through which we can actually get spending bills or spending to be passed because of the true partisanship nature of so many things. But it's something that I think we should be looking at dissecting, and it's something that I look forward to working on.
Steve, you have 36 seconds.
There's not true partisanship when it comes to defense. I can tell you that. I sat on Armed Services. There's 63 members. Our defense appropriation, or our defense policy bill this last year was voted on with 1 negative vote. That was 62 to 1. So it is not a partisan issue. It's very bipartisan that we work to make sure our men and women are prepared, and when they come home, they are taken care of. The last thing I'll say is I put in 9 amendments to the NDAA this year. All 9 were accepted. All 9 will have a direct impact on this district.
Okay, you have 30 seconds.
Yeah, my point was that armed services is actually not partisan, whereas so many other things are. But that actually gives me the opportunity to go back to bipartisanship. And I think, Congressman Knight, you mentioned that you were the 63rd most bipartisan person in Congress. And, you know, I did a lot of horse shows when I was a kid, and I don't recall ever getting a medal for 63rd place. But I do appreciate that there's some effort going on there.
Okay, thank you. And that actually goes to our next, That actually goes to our next topic, which was going to be bipartisanship. Katie, you have 1 minute.
Sure, this is something I'm really excited about. I grew up in a bipartisan home. My dad's a police officer and a lifelong Republican. The first time he ever voted for a Democrat ever was when he voted for me in June. And my mom's a Democrat and a registered nurse. And I know that these issues, the issues that we're talking about, have been increasingly polarized, but that doesn't represent the true views of most Americans, including the people here in this community. I know that when we talk about our values, when we talk about the issues that affect our day-to-day lives, if you take away the rhetoric that we're hearing from our leaders and from the media and from the people who are having this conversation at the national level, then we're able to actually make progress. We're able to come to some kind of an agreement, even though we're not going to agree on everything. And frankly, the only way that we can actually have true bipartisanship is if we have people in Washington who are going to make this a priority and who are going to represent their entire community, their entire district, regardless of whether those people voted for them. And the truth is that that has not happened with Congressman Knight.
Thank you. Steve, you have 1 minute.
Well, let's get to the real truth, because the real truth is that has happened. A lot of issues are getting their way through Congress and to the president's desk and getting signed that are bipartisan. So when people say, oh boy, nothing's happening, everything is all clogged up, I say, yes, there are issues, but we're getting a lot of things done. The last week we were there, we did a 5-year reauthorization of the FAA. That hasn't happened in years. We normally fight and scream over that every year or every 2 years. We did defense spending. We got that knocked out, and that had 380 votes on the floor. That is hugely bipartisan. When I was a state senator, I was in a supermajority. I got more bills passed than any other Republican senator in Senate in California. So I was number 1. So, and then just looking at this bipartisan Lugar Institute, if you are in that kind of group where you are very bipartisan, people are saying, boy, when you write a letter, you look for a Democrat to be on it. When you write a bill, you're reaching across the aisle. That's what they're doing.
Thank you. Katie, you have 30 seconds to respond.
The partisanship is really something that it comes down to who is going to be able to stand up to their party when it really counts. And we've seen Congressman Knight not do that on the votes that really matter the most, whether it be on the Affordable Care Act. He voted 9 times to repeal the Affordable Care Act without a plan, including last year, when it would have taken away health care from 60,000 people in this district. We've seen that when it really matters, he is accountable to his party because they are the ones who are funding his campaign, and that's not something that I would have.
Thank you, Katie. Steve?
Boy, if we're talking about funding, she's outraised me by about 5 to 1. 10 times more money will come in for Katie Hill than will come in for Steve Knight. I am sure of that. So if we want to talk about finance reform, let's talk about that. Let's talk about all the money that comes into campaigns. We can absolutely do that. But let's look at what I have done. I've signed 2 discharge petitions while I've been in Congress against my leadership, not against my party, against my leadership and everyone, to make sure that I was standing up for what's valuable for this district.
Thank you, Steve. And you're going first on our next topic. And again, remember, it's open-ended. You guys can take the conversation where you'd like. NAFTA.
NAFTA.
You have 1 minute.
Okay. So NAFTA's, I fully supported a change in NAFTA, but keeping NAFTA kind of moving in the same progress. We dealt with an awful lot of people that move goods back and forth across the Canadian border, across the Mexican border, and a lot of these are truckers and companies that they're an international company, so they deal with not just these 3 countries, but they deal across the oceans. And they said, boy, we've got some issues with NAFTA. We want to get them fixed. but we want to keep NAFTA as a whole moving in the same direction. So in our roundtables and our talking to different groups, that's the way we thought that was the best way. If you would have just killed NAFTA and said we're going to start all over, I would have been 100% against that. And you've seen the new NAFTA agreement is very close to the old NAFTA agreement, just fix some of the items.
Katie, you have 1 minute.
Sure. NAFTA does need, it needs fixing. I think that what we've seen is just in time for the election, we've seen a pretend new agreement that has none of the details fleshed out. This is something that we haven't had the opportunity to really work on. And as we all know, the devil's in the details. That's something that I know all too well from working on a number of issues as the executive director of a huge organization. You can't just say, oh, look, we fixed it, problem solved. We actually have to go through it line by line, solve the problems that are going to protect American jobs and are going to protect our critical relationships with our allies. So it's something that we have to make sure that we are on a continuously moving forward basis, working through the details in an effective manner.
Thank you, Katie.
I'm good.
If there's, okay. Okay, going to the next, speaking of relations with foreign countries, the topic is U.S.-Iran relations. Katie?
Sure. There's no doubt that Iran is one of the most dangerous entities in the Middle East and across the world, that we have to do everything that we can to ensure that we're preventing them from getting nuclear weapons. I have a number of concerns with the way that the Iran deal was taken out off the table completely. I think that it's something that was not perfect, but that it gave us some kind of plan in place, particularly in terms of how we were working with our allies across the world to provide some measure of accountability. So I think it's a multifaceted issue. It's one that we need to continue to work on, and it's one that we need to work on in conjunction with our allies across the globe.
Steve?
Yeah, the JCPOA was a horrible deal. If I'm going to the table and I'm trying to get something from somebody and they're going to give me something, then we're trying to flush something out. We're trying to get a compromise. That shouldn't have been the way this was worked out. It should have been, this is what we expect. This is what we will do. Here it is. If you sign it, then we agree. If you don't, then we don't. And we continue sanctions, and we even build more sanctions onto that. Iran is hugely dangerous to not just the Middle East, but the globe as a whole. They do not want to work with the other communities in the area, and they do not want to be part of the international community. So the people of Iran know this, and many of them want to get out from under this. It's just the regime of Iran is holding them down, and unless we can get back to sanctioning them and putting these types of issues on top of that regime, then they will flourish.
Okay, thank you, Steve.
Good.
Good, okay. Moving on to our next topic. Steve, you're going to go first on this one. The next step for our healthcare system.
Healthcare. So the two biggest items in Congress that are the most difficult to talk about are healthcare and immigration. There are people that just want to make this a political issue and say, boy, you were for this, I was for that, or vice versa, and so I don't even want to talk about this because you did the wrong thing. The fact of the matter is healthcare can be fixed in the United States, but we have to sit down and work with groups. I'm part of a bipartisan group that we do look at the different issues. The very first one we are looking at is prescription medications, because we know it's very difficult to get a prescription medication at a price and continue to get that prescription at a price that's affordable for everyone. But we also have to look at the the communities as a whole and say, how can we build more products that can give the accessibility and the affordability right there and bring in more competition. So there's a lot that we can do with healthcare, but right now it's just a political issue. You voted for this or you voted against this, so I'm against you and I won't even talk to you.
Katie, you have 1 minute.
Yeah, healthcare is one of the number one issues that we hear about over and over again. It's something that's affected my family personally. It's an issue that I've worked on the front lines of. And I think all we need to know about Congressman Knight's record on this is how he voted when it mattered, which is when it would have taken away healthcare from 60,000 people in this community. Additionally, when it comes to prescription drugs, he has taken countless dollars from prescription drug companies and voted against regulations that would have allowed us to negotiate prescription drug costs. We also have to protect and expand the Affordable Care Act. It's not perfect in any way, shape, or form, but we have to have the basic protections in place that are going to ensure that people are able to afford care. It's well over $1,000 a month for my husband and I to have insurance that is going to allow us to keep our doctors after I left my job. And it's something that every single person in this community is struggling with. We need people who have experience working in healthcare, who are going to go there and work with all the parties and are going to get things done.
Thank you, Katie. Steve, you have 30 seconds to respond.
Well, absolutely. I have experience working in healthcare. My wife is a NICU nurse. She's been a NICU nurse for now about 25 years, working with babies that fit in your hand. We deal very closely with not just the nurses and the doctors, but every part of the healthcare system. It's very, very difficult to go in there and say that we're going to put a system like ACA in place, and then we're going to leave it, and we don't ever want to say anything about it. And if you do, then I'm going to bring it up in politics, because that's the way we go. But the fact of the matter is, you've got to work on these things incrementally so that we make sure that they can work in the communities and we can afford them.
Katie, you have 30 seconds.
Yeah, I worked on the Medicaid expansion here in California in a dramatic way, working with every single level of the healthcare system, whether it's direct care providers or it's the healthcare plans and it's actual consumers of care. So it's something that I have real direct experience with. My mom and both grandmothers are nurses, but that's not the experience that matters in this regard. It's actual policy. We do need an incremental approach, but that incremental approach has to ensure that the protections that have been given to people already are still in place while we work towards adding more.
Thank you. And at that point, we're essentially out of time. We're going to go to our closing statements. Katie, you have 2 minutes.
Sure. Well, I want to thank the Signal and you and College of the Canyons for hosting us. I think this has been a great conversation. This campaign has been about organizing people and organizing grassroots for people who want a change. We know that for far too long, our political system has been about the powers that are already in place, whether that's wealthy individuals, huge corporations, partisan politics, and that because of that, we have seen failure after failure after failure to get things done on behalf of our community. And the only way that we're going to be able to change that is by sending people to Washington who have fresh ideas, who have real experience, who have the ability to go in and stand up to politics as usual and to change things. I am somebody who has spent my entire life here in this community. I love this community. I was never planning on becoming a politician. I have spent my entire career serving vulnerable people, serving our men and women who have served our country, and making sure that we're addressing issues by bringing all people to the table. I know that with the literally 25,000 plus donors who have given to this campaign and the 5,000 plus volunteers, that this is a movement at this point. And every single person has the opportunity to change things, not only for this community, but for our entire country with a single vote. So no matter which way you vote, please make sure you vote by November 6th. I look forward to seeing you out there, and let's do this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Katie. Steve, 2 minutes.
Yeah, I want to thank the Signal. I want to thank everyone for tuning in out there and making sure that they're hearing the differences in the two candidates. We're looking at results and resistance here. That's exactly what we're looking at. We're looking at someone who's been in Congress now for 3.5 years and has a huge amount of wins for the district. Whether it be the CDBG funds, whether it be the choke point correction that we've gotten over the last few weeks, whether it be just the 2 bills that were signed in the last 2 weeks from October 5th to today for sexual trauma in our military and to make sure that every airport across the country has a private room for breastfeeding. Just in the last week, we have seen those accomplishments. Those are my bills. So we've moved forward with what we told you we would. We would stand up for the armed services. We'd stand up for our veteran care. We'd stand up for small business, and we'd make sure that this is a place where everyone can communicate. That's why I'm a bipartisan member of Congress. That's why we do it that way. That's why I was a bipartisan member in a very difficult atmosphere in Sacramento. It is a track record. You see what you get, and you see the concrete behind it of actually words and accomplishments by activity. If you go the other way, you're looking at a resistance of saying, boy, we can have a change. We don't want a vibrant economy. We don't want our unemployment to be at 3.7%. We actually want to do changes to all of this. That is not the way that America is going to continue to grow, is going to continue to get us out of the deficit, move us toward paying down our debt, keep our defense moving in the right direction, and working right here in the community to fix the issues of the day. Thank you very much, Perry.
Thank you again. I'd like to take this opportunity on behalf of the Signal and publisher Richard Budman to thank both of you guys for being here and to remind our audience watching that October 22nd is the last day to register to vote in California, and please show out and vote Tuesday, November 6th.